The graduation ceremony stretched across the manicured lawn of the university quad, rows of folding chairs facing a temporary stage draped in burgundy and gold. I sat somewhere in the middle of the sea of caps and gowns, my diploma cover clutched in sweaty hands, trying to ignore the way my mother kept checking her phone 3 rows behind me in the family section. The June sun beat down mercilessly, and I could feel sweat pooling under my polyester gown. My grandmother arrived late, as she always did, but her entrance was impossible to miss. At 78, Vivian commanded attention without trying. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and she wore a cream suit that probably cost more than my entire college wardrobe. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who had built a commercial real estate empire from nothing, her cane more accessory than necessity. I caught her eye as she settled into the seat my father had saved for her, and she winked at me. That wink carried me through the endless speeches and the alphabetical trudge across the stage to collect my diploma. When they finally called my name, Maggie Brennan, I heard her voice rise above the polite applause, shouting with an enthusiasm that made several people turn and smile. The ceremony ended with the traditional tossing of caps, though I held on to mine, thinking about the deposit I would get back if I returned it undamaged. My parents had already explained, multiple times, that graduation was expensive enough without throwing away a $40 rental. I found my family near the refreshment tent, where my grandmother was holding court with several other relatives I barely recognized. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of Chanel and peppermint. "My brilliant granddaughter," she announced to anyone within earshot. "Bachelor of Business Administration, summa cum laude. I knew you had it in you." My mother, Diane, smiled tightly. She wore a floral dress that I recognized from at least 3 other family events, her blonde hair styled in the same way she had worn it for the past decade. My father, Gregory, stood beside her in a suit that pulled slightly across his shoulders, nodding along to whatever story my uncle was telling. "We should take some photos," my mother suggested, already pulling out her phone. "The light is perfect right now." We arranged ourselves in various configurations, while other families did the same around us. My grandmother insisted on several shots of just the 2 of us, her arm around my waist, both of us grinning at the camera. "Now," she said, once my mother had finally declared herself satisfied with the photography session, "I want to hear all about your plans. Where are you thinking of working? What are you going to do with all that business knowledge?" I launched into the explanation I had practiced, about how I was applying to positions in hospitality management, how I had already secured 3 interviews for the following week, how I was hoping to work my way up through a hotel chain, and eventually into regional management. My grandmother listened intently, asking questions about markets and growth potential, nodding approvingly at my answers. She had always taken my career aspirations seriously, even when I was 10 years old and wanted to run a dog grooming business. "And financially?" she asked, her pale blue eyes studying my face. "How are you managing? I know these first few months after graduation can be tricky." "Lots of expenses, waiting for that first real paycheck." "I am okay," I said, though it was not entirely true. My bank account had exactly $842 in it, and my student loans would start coming due in 6 months. "I have been living pretty frugally. I found a decent apartment share situation in Austin that starts next month." My grandmother tilted her head, a small frown creasing her forehead. "But surely you have been supplementing with the trust fund. That is exactly what it is there for, to help you get established." The words hung in the air between us. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "I am sorry. What?" "Your trust fund, darling. The one I established for you when you were born." She said it casually, as if she were asking about the weather. $3 million. I know that sounds like a lot, but invested wisely, it should give you a comfortable cushion while you build your career. The noise of the graduation celebration seemed to fade into the background. I could see my mother's face go pale. My father suddenly very interested in something on the ground. Other family members who had been standing nearby found reasons to drift away. "Grandmother," I said slowly, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. I have no idea what you're talking about. What trust fund? Her expression shifted from curious to concerned, to something harder, sharper. She looked past me to where my parents stood, frozen in place. Diane, Gregory, what is going on here? My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Mother, perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private. No, my grandmother said, her voice cutting through the pleasant afternoon like a blade. We will discuss it right here, right now. Maggie, you truly have no knowledge of this money. I shook my head, feeling like the ground beneath my feet had become unstable. I have never heard anything about any trust fund. Are you certain? Maybe you are thinking of a different grandchild? You are my only grandchild, she said, still looking at my parents. And I am absolutely certain. I established a trust fund for you with $3 million on the day you were born. Your parents were named as trustees until you turned 21, at which point you were supposed to gain full access. That was 4 years ago, Maggie. My father finally found his voice, though it came out rough and uncertain. This is not the time or place for this conversation. We are at Maggie's graduation. We should be celebrating. Then let us celebrate the fact that my granddaughter has $3 million waiting for her, my grandmother said. Her tone was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Unless there is some reason we cannot celebrate that. The silence that followed was deafening. Around us, other families laughed and took photos and made plans for celebratory dinners. I stood in the middle of what should have been one of the happiest days of my life, watching my parents avoid eye contact with everyone. The trust fund, my mother said finally, each word seeming to cost her. There were some complications, some investments that did not perform as expected, legal fees, taxes. $3 million worth of complications? My grandmother's voice could have frozen water. Maggie, sweetheart, why don't you go get yourself something to drink from that tent? Your parents and I need to have a conversation. No, I heard myself say. Whatever this is about, it involves me. I am not going anywhere. My grandmother studied me for a moment, then nodded approvingly. You are right. You deserve to know. She turned back to my parents. I want a full accounting. Every single transaction, every investment decision, every dollar spent. And I want it within 48 hours. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Mother, please. You are making a scene. I have not even begun to make a scene, Diane. But if you prefer, we can absolutely continue this discussion in front of all your friends and neighbors, or you can agree to provide the documentation I am requesting. My father put his hand on my mother's shoulder. We will get you the paperwork, but you need to understand. We did what we thought was best for Maggie. We were trying to protect her. Protect her from what? Financial security? The ability to graduate without crushing debt? Please, enlighten me. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw things I had somehow missed before. My mother's designer handbag that she claimed to have bought on sale. The new car my father drove, the one he said he got through some special program at work. The kitchen renovation they completed 2 years ago, which they said was paid for through a home equity loan. How much is left? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Of the $3 million, how much is still there? Neither of them answered. My mother wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara. My father stared at something in the distance. Answer your granddaughter, Vivian commanded. We will need to go through everything carefully. My father hedged. There were a lot of complex transactions over the years. We invested in several business opportunities that seemed promising at the time. Some of them paid off, some did not. We paid for your education, Maggie. Your rent during college. Your car insurance. All of those things came from somewhere. I had student loans, I said, my mind reeling. I have $50,000 in student loan debt that I'm going to be paying off for the next decade. And you just said you paid for my education from the trust fund. Partially, my mother interjected. We paid for some of it. But college is expensive, Maggie. Even with the trust fund, we had to make choices. My grandmother made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a snarl. I paid for college. The trust fund was supposed to be for after, to give her a foundation to build on. And you dare to stand here and tell me you spent it on things you should have been paying for yourselves? People were definitely staring now. I could feel their eyes on us, could sense the shift in the atmosphere as graduation joy curdled into something uglier. I wanted to disappear, to rewind the day and go back to the moment before my grandmother asked her innocent question. But I also wanted answers. Needed them. I want to see the paperwork too, I said. Everything. Every bank statement, every investment record, every check you wrote. If that money was supposed to be mine, I have a right to know what happened to it. My mother looked like she might be sick. Maggie, please. You do not understand how complicated these things are. Your father and I, we did our best. We made some mistakes, yes, but we were trying to secure a better future for all of us. For all of us, I repeated. You mean for yourselves. That is not fair, my father protested. Everything we did with you in mind. The business opportunities we invested in, if they had paid off, you would have benefited enormously. You would have had twice what you started with. We were trying to grow your wealth. By gambling with it? My grandmother's contempt was palpable. By using your daughter's inheritance as your personal investment fund? Did you even consult with financial advisors? Did you have any professional oversight at all? The answer, clearly written on both their faces, was no. My uncle had drifted back over, along with my aunt and a couple of cousins. They stood at a respectful distance, but close enough to hear everything. I could see the shock on their faces, the way they looked at my parents with something like disgust. We need to go, my mother said, her voice breaking. Gregory, get the car. No one is leaving until I have your agreement, in writing if necessary, that you will provide full financial disclosure, my grandmother said. And Maggie should come stay with me while we sort this out. She is our daughter, my father said, but there was no conviction behind the words. She is a 25-year-old adult who has just discovered that her parents have been lying to her for years, my grandmother countered. Maggie, the choice is yours, of course, but my door is always open. I looked between them, my parents who suddenly seemed like strangers, and my grandmother who was offering me a lifeline I had not known I needed. Around us, the graduation celebration continued, but our little corner had become an island of misery and tension. I need some time, I said finally. I need to think. Of course you do, my grandmother said gently. But please, at least come to dinner tonight. Just you and me. Let these two stew in what they have done. My parents did not protest. They looked deflated, beaten down by the weight of their own secrets finally coming to light. My mother's phone buzzed in her purse, and I wondered how many of our relatives were already texting about the scene they had just witnessed. Okay, I agreed. Dinner. But I am going back to my apartment first. I need to be alone for a while. My grandmother nodded and pulled me in for another hug. I am so proud of you, sweetheart. Your degree, your accomplishments, everything you have done despite being handicapped by these two. You are going to be extraordinary. I hugged her back, breathing in her familiar scent, trying to anchor myself to something solid in a world that had just tilted on its axis. When I pulled away, I could not bring myself to look at my parents. I drove back to my apartment in a daze, my graduation gown still on, my cap on the passenger seat beside me. The route was familiar, but everything looked strange, as if I were seeing my life through new eyes. Every billboard, every stoplight, every other car on the road seemed to be asking the same question. What else had I missed? What else had been hidden from me? My apartment was the 4th floor of an old house converted into student housing. I had shared it with 3 other girls for the past 2 years, but they had all moved out the previous week, leaving the space echoing and strange. Our mismatched furniture was gone, replaced by their absence. I sat on my lumpy futon, the only piece of furniture I owned, and tried to process what had just happened. $3 million. The number was almost meaningless, too large to comprehend. I tried to imagine what that much money looked like, what it could do. I could have graduated debt-free with money to spare. I could have traveled, taken unpaid internships at prestigious companies, built a professional wardrobe that did not come from thrift stores. I could have had choices, opportunities, a foundation to build on. Instead, I had student loans and $842 in my checking account. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Text messages from my mother, my father, relatives I had not spoken to in months. I ignored them all except for one from my grandmother, confirming dinner at 7 at her house in the hills overlooking the city. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Trust fund laws, trustee responsibilities, fiduciary duty. The words swam in front of my eyes, but certain phrases jumped out. Trustees were legally required to act in the best interest of the beneficiary. They could be held liable for losses due to negligence or self-dealing. There were penalties, legal remedies, ways to recover stolen funds. Because that was what this was, I realized. Theft. My parents had stolen from me. They had lied to my face for years while spending money that was supposed to be mine. Every time they had told me to be more frugal, to think carefully about my spending, to understand that money did not grow on trees, they had been gaslighting me while living off my inheritance. I thought about my mother's designer handbags, my father's new car, their renovated kitchen with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. I thought about the vacation they took to Europe last year, just the 2 of them, while I worked double shifts at a campus coffee shop to make rent. They said it was a second honeymoon, a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Had they paid for it with my money? The anger, when it finally came, was white-hot and purifying. I was not just mad about the money, though that was certainly part of it. I was furious about the betrayal, the years of deception, the casual way they had robbed me of opportunities and choices. I was enraged at how they had played the role of struggling parents, martyrs who sacrificed everything for their daughter, while secretly living high on money that was supposed to be mine. I wanted revenge. The thought crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. I wanted them to suffer the way I was suffering now. I wanted them to lose everything the way they had taken everything from me. I wanted justice, and I wanted them to know exactly who had delivered it. But I was also practical enough to know that revenge required planning. It required information, leverage, strategy. I needed to understand the full scope of what they had done, needed documentation and evidence, and a clear picture of where every dollar had gone. Lucky for me, I had just graduated with a degree in business administration. I knew how to analyze financial statements, how to trace money trails, how to build a case. My grandmother would help. She had not built a real estate empire by being soft or forgiving. She understood business, understood leverage, and most importantly, she understood family. Not the Hallmark card version of family that pretended everything was fine as long as no one rocked the boat. The real version, where trust had to be earned and betrayal had consequences. I showered and changed into clean clothes, something simple and professional. I was not the naive girl who had walked across that graduation stage a few hours ago. That version of me had believed my parents when they said they were doing their best, had accepted their explanations about tight budgets and necessary sacrifices. This version of me knew better. My grandmother's house sat at the end of a winding drive, a sprawling ranch-style home with views of the entire city below. I had always loved visiting here, loved the way the sunset painted the sky in impossible colors, loved the sense of space and possibility. Tonight, as I pulled up to the house, It felt different. It felt like coming home to somewhere I actually belonged. Vivian met me at the door wearing comfortable slacks and a cashmere sweater, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She pulled me inside without a word and guided me to the kitchen, where she already had wine breathing and cheese arranged on a wooden board. "Sit," she commanded, pouring me a generous glass. "Drink. Then we talk." I sat. I drank. And then, finally, I started asking the questions I should have asked years ago. My grandmother spread financial documents across her dining room table like a general planning a campaign. She had ordered Thai food, which sat cooling in containers at the far end of the table, forgotten as we poured over 25 years of paperwork. The trust fund had been established on the day I was born, funded initially with $2 million from the sale of one of her commercial properties. The additional $1 million had come from careful investments over the first 5 years of my life, managed by professionals who understood fiduciary responsibility. "Look at this," Vivian said, pointing to a statement from my 21st birthday. "The account balance was $3.2 million at the point of transfer. Your parents took full control, and within 6 months, it had dropped to $2.8 million. I leaned closer, studying the transactions. Large withdrawals, sometimes $50,000 at a time, with vague notations. Investment opportunities, business ventures, consulting fees. Nothing specific, nothing that could be easily traced or verified." "What were they thinking?" I asked, not for the first time that evening. "They were thinking about themselves," my grandmother said bluntly. "Your father has always had grand ideas about being an entrepreneur. He works in pharmaceutical sales, makes a decent salary, but he wants to be more. He wants to be a mogul, a success story, so he invests in things he does not understand, with money that is not his to risk." "And my mother?" Vivian's expression softened slightly. "Your mother grew up poor, really poor, not just middle class pretending to struggle. She married your father thinking he was going to take her places, give her the life she dreamed about. When that did not happen fast enough, she decided to help it along. I thought about my mother's constant anxiety about appearances, the way she obsessed over what the neighbors thought, how she always needed to have the right brands, the right car, the right address. I had assumed it was just vanity. Now I understood it was something deeper, more desperate. "Can we get the money back?" I asked. "Is there any legal recourse?" "That depends on where it went and whether they still have assets we can claim." My grandmother pulled out another folder, this one containing information her attorney had already begun gathering. "I made some calls this afternoon. Your parents own the house, but it has a substantial mortgage. The car your father drives is leased. Their bank accounts show regular deposits from his salary and not much else. If they spent your trust fund, they have very little to show for it." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they stolen my money, they had wasted it, poured it down drain after drain, chasing dreams and maintaining appearances. Even if I sued them, even if I won, there might be nothing left to recover. "We sue them anyway," my grandmother said, reading my expression. "We make them face consequences, even if we cannot recover all the money. We file criminal charges if necessary. We make sure everyone knows what they did." "That will destroy them," I said quietly. "Good." There was no mercy in her voice. "They destroyed your future. Turnabout is fair play." But something in me hesitated. They were still my parents, despite everything. I had spent 25 years loving them, trusting them, believing they wanted what was best for me. Could I really be the instrument of their complete destruction? "I see that look," my grandmother said. "You are thinking about mercy, about family loyalty, about taking the high road. Let me tell you something, Maggie. The high road is a luxury you cannot afford. You have student loans coming due in 6 months. You have no savings, no safety net, nothing to fall back on if something goes wrong. Your parents took that from you. They do not deserve your mercy." She was right, and I knew it. but knowing it intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. I picked at the pad thai, my appetite gone despite not having eaten since breakfast. "There is something else," Vivian said, pulling out another document. "I had my attorney do some digging this afternoon. Your father invested heavily in a company called Nexus Biotech about 3 years ago. Do you know anything about that?" I shook my head. "I have never heard of it." "It is a pharmaceutical startup. One of his clients turned business partner. Your father put in $400,000 of trust fund money. The company went under last year. Total loss. $400,000. Gone. Evaporated. The number was so large I could barely comprehend it. That was almost 10 years of the salary I was hoping to make in my first job. That was a house, multiple houses in some parts of the country. That was freedom and choices and opportunities, all sacrificed to my father's ego and poor judgment." "What else?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Another $300,000 went into a real estate flip that your mother orchestrated with some friends. They bought a property at auction, planned to renovate and sell at a profit. Except they underestimated the costs, overestimated the market, and ended up selling at a loss. Then there was the restaurant investment, the cryptocurrency speculation, the medical device company that turned out to be a fraud." She kept listing failures, each one representing tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of my money, my future, my life. I felt numb, disconnected from my own body, as if I were watching this happen to someone else. "The worst part," my grandmother continued, "is that they never consulted professionals. They never talked to financial advisors or attorneys or anyone who might have told them these were terrible ideas. They just threw your money at anything that promised quick returns, living high on your dime while it lasted." "How much is left?" I asked. "In total, how much of the original $3 million is still accessible?" Vivian met my eyes, and I saw genuine pain there. "Based on what we can determine so far, about $230,000, maybe less, depending on what other surprises we uncover." 230,000 out of 3 million. They had blown through nearly $3 million in 4 years. The sheer scale of the waste, the stupidity, the selfishness of it made me want to scream. Instead, I just sat there, staring at the paperwork, trying to make sense of numbers that refused to add up to anything but betrayal. "I want to file suit tomorrow," I said finally. "I want to freeze whatever assets they have left. I want to make sure they cannot spend another dollar of my money." "Already in motion," my grandmother said. "My attorney is drafting the paperwork tonight. We file first thing in the morning. But Maggie, you need to understand what this means. Your parents will fight back. They will try to justify what they did, will claim they were acting in your best interest. They will make you out to be ungrateful, selfish, cruel. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the student loans in my name, the debt I would be carrying for years, because they had chosen to spend my trust fund instead of using it for its intended purpose. I thought about the sacrifices I had made, the opportunities I had passed up, the stress and anxiety of trying to make ends meet while they lived comfortably on money that should have been mine. "Let them try," I said. The lawsuit hit my parents 3 days later, delivered by a process server at 7 in the morning while they were having breakfast. My grandmother's attorney had moved with impressive speed, filing for an emergency injunction to freeze their assets and demanding a full accounting of the trust fund. The local newspaper ran a small story about it in the business section, because my grandmother was well known in the community, and the amount of money involved made it newsworthy. I stayed at my grandmother's house, sleeping in her guest room with its view of the city lights and its too-soft bed. She gave me space when I needed it, and company when I did not, never pushing but always present. We developed a routine. Mornings were for coffee and strategy sessions with her attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia who wore power suits and took no prisoners. Afternoons were for job interviews and apartment hunting. Evenings were for wine, and increasingly elaborate plans for revenge. My parents tried to call, tried to text, tried to show up at my grandmother's house. We did not respond to the calls, deleted the texts unread, and had security turn them away at the gate. They hired their own attorney, a man who specialized in family law and had a reputation for playing dirty. He sent letters claiming I was being manipulated by my grandmother, that my parents had always acted in my best interest, that the trust fund had been used entirely for my benefit. Patricia destroyed those claims methodically. She subpoenaed bank records, credit card statements, property records. She traced every dollar of the trust fund and documented exactly where it had gone. The picture that emerged was damning. My parents had spent hundreds of thousands on their own lifestyle while claiming poverty. They had gambled with my future on risky investments without any professional guidance. They had violated every principle of fiduciary duty. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. My mother's sister, Aunt Carol, reached out to me through Facebook. She wanted to meet for coffee, wanted to talk about something important. I was suspicious, but my grandmother encouraged me to hear her out. We met at a cafe downtown on a Tuesday afternoon. Carol was younger than my mother by 5 years, worked as a dental hygienist, and had always seemed like the more stable sibling. She ordered an iced tea and fiddled with the straw for a long moment before speaking. "Your mother has been bragging," she said finally. "For years she has been telling me about the money they had access to, about how they were investing it and building wealth. She said you knew about it, that it was a family decision. I believed her because why would she lie about something like that?" I felt ice settle in my stomach. "What exactly did she say?" Carol pulled out her phone, scrolling through text messages. "Here, from 2 years ago. She is talking about a vacation to France they were planning. She says, 'We are using some of Maggie's money for this, but she does not mind. She knows we are going to pay it back with interest.'" She showed me the message. There it was, in my mother's own words, acknowledging that they were spending my money without my knowledge or consent. But the really interesting part came next. "And here," Carol continued, scrolling further, "from last year, she is complaining about you being stressed about student loans. She says, 'I do not understand why Maggie is being so dramatic. She has the trust fund. She can pay those loans off whenever she wants.' My mother had known I was struggling with debt, had watched me stress about money, and had said nothing about the trust fund that was supposed to be mine. She had let me suffer while sitting on access to millions of dollars. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Carol looked uncomfortable. "Because your mother called me after the lawsuit was filed. She wanted me to testify on their behalf, to say that you had always known about the trust fund and had approved their investment decisions. She wanted me to lie for her in court. When I refused, she said some things that made me realize she has been lying to me for years too. I am not covering for her anymore. Will you testify about these texts? About what she told you?" "Already talked to your grandmother's attorney. I am giving her everything I have." She paused, then added, "I am sorry, Maggie. I should have questioned things earlier. I should have asked more questions when she talked about having access to all that money. But she is my sister, and I wanted to believe her." "I know the feeling," I said. We talked for another hour, with Carol filling in details about my parents' spending that I had not known. The expensive furniture they had bought and claimed came from estate sales. The jewelry my mother wore that supposedly belonged to her grandmother. The country club membership they maintained while telling me they could not afford to help with my textbooks. Every revelation was another small cut, another piece of evidence that the parents I thought I knew had been a fiction. Patricia was thrilled with the evidence. She filed an amended complaint that included fraud charges, using my mother's own text messages to prove they had intentionally concealed the trust fund from me. The defense crumbled. Their attorney tried to negotiate a settlement, offering to return what was left of the money in exchange for dropping the criminal charges. My grandmother wanted to refuse, wanted to push for maximum penalties. But I was starting to understand that revenge was not just about punishment. It was about taking back control, about rewriting the narrative, about making sure this never happened to me again. "We take the settlement," I told Patricia and my grandmother during one of our morning meetings. "But we add conditions. They pay back the money over time, with interest. They make a public apology. And they never contact me again, unless I initiate it." "That is too lenient," my grandmother protested. "Maybe," I agreed. "But it gets me what I need, which is resources to rebuild my life. And it leaves them alive to think about what they did, to live with the consequences every single day." Patricia drew up the settlement agreement with those terms. My parents signed it a week later, their attorney looking relieved that we had not pushed for jail time. The $230,000 that remained of the original trust fund was transferred to a new account in my name only. My parents agreed to monthly payments of $3,000 for the next 10 years to repay what they had lost, secured by a lien on their house. But I was not done. Not by a long shot. The job interviews I had lined up before graduation turned out better than expected. A boutique hotel in Austin offered me a position as an assistant front office manager, with a clear path to promotion and a salary that would let me live comfortably while I figured out my next steps. I accepted, found an apartment in a newly renovated building downtown, and threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised even me. But I also started digging deeper into my parents' financial history, hiring a forensic accountant with some of the recovered trust fund money. I wanted to know everything, wanted to understand the full scope of what they had done. What we found was even worse than I had imagined. The investment in Nexus Biotech had not been just stupidity. My father had known the company was struggling before he put in the $400,000. He had invested anyway because the owner had promised him a position as vice president of sales if they could secure additional funding. It was a bribe, essentially, and my father had paid it with my money. The real estate flip my mother orchestrated had been done with the wives of 2 other men at my father's company. They had formed an informal investment club, using money from various sources, including my trust fund, to speculate on properties. When that venture failed, my mother had convinced my father to put more of my money into a second property. That one failed too, but not before my mother and her friends had paid themselves generous consulting fees for their trouble. The cryptocurrency speculation had happened during the height of the market frenzy. My father had put in nearly $500,000 across various digital currencies, buying high and selling low, making every rookie mistake in the book. He had lost it all in less than 6 months. But the worst discovery came from examining their personal expenses during the time they had control of the trust fund. They had been transferring money regularly to cover their mortgage, their car payments, their credit card bills. In effect, they had been using my trust fund as their personal bank account, living far beyond their means on money that was supposed to be securing my future. I documented everything, built spreadsheets, created presentations. I wanted to understand not just what they had done, but how they had justified it to themselves. The answer, I realized, was that they had never really seen it as my money. To them, it was family money, and family meant they could use it however they saw fit. The public apology had been part of the settlement agreement. My parents resisted at first, but their attorney convinced them it was better than facing criminal charges. They posted a statement on social media, carefully worded by lawyers, acknowledging that they had mismanaged my trust fund and expressing regret for their actions. The response was immediate and brutal. Friends and family members who had heard rumors but not believed them now had confirmation. The comment section filled with shock, disappointment, and outright condemnation. My father's company received inquiries about his judgment and integrity. My mother's investment club friends distanced themselves quickly, claiming they had not known the money was not hers to invest. But social media shame was not enough for me. I wanted something more permanent, something that would ensure they never forgot what they had done. I started a blog, writing under my own name, detailing the entire experience. How I had discovered the theft on my graduation day, what I had found when I started investigating, the settlements and the legal proceedings. I named names, included documents with identifying information redacted but content intact. The blog went viral within a week. Media outlets picked up the story. I did interviews on podcasts and local news stations, always calm, always factual, always devastatingly precise in my recounting of what my parents had done. I became the face of financial abuse within families, a cautionary tale about trust and betrayal. My father lost his job 3 months later. His company claimed it was part of a restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. No pharmaceutical company wanted a sales representative who had stolen from his own daughter. His reputation in the industry was destroyed. My mother fared no better. Her friends stopped calling. The country club membership my parents had clung to for so long was quietly not renewed. She had to get a job as a receptionist at a medical office, working for close to minimum wage for the first time in her adult life. They sold the house, unable to keep up with the mortgage payments and the monthly restitution to me. They moved into a small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, driving an old sedan my father bought with cash. Everything they had built, all the appearances they had maintained, came crashing down. I watched it happen with a cold satisfaction that probably should have worried me but did not. They had stolen from me, lied to me, betrayed every principle of parental duty. They deserved everything they got and more. My grandmother approved of my methods, proud of how thoroughly I had dismantled their lives. "You have the killer instinct," she told me one evening over dinner. "You understand that real revenge is not hot. It is cold. It is calculated. It is permanent." "I learned from the best," I said, toasting her with my wine glass. "You did indeed. Now, let me tell you about some opportunities I am seeing in the commercial real estate market. I think you should start investing what is left of your trust fund, but properly this time. Let me teach you how to build real wealth." I listened, taking notes, asking questions. I had lost 4 years and nearly $3 million to my parents' greed and stupidity. But I still had time, still had resources, still had the intelligence and drive to build something meaningful. And unlike them, I would do it honestly, carefully, with professional guidance and clear principles. The monthly payments from my parents came in like clockwork. The money automatically transferred from their account to mine. $3,000 a month for the next 10 years, a constant reminder of what they had done. I put it all into carefully chosen investments, watching it grow slowly but steadily, building the foundation they should have protected. My career advanced quickly. The hotel recognized my talent for numbers and strategy, promoting me to front office manager after a year, then to assistant general manager after another 18 months. I started consulting on the side, helping other hotels optimize their operations. The money was good, but more importantly, the work was satisfying. I was building something real, something that belonged to me alone. But there was still one more piece of revenge I wanted to claim. One final act that would cement my victory and ensure my parents never forgot the cost of their betrayal. 3 years after graduation, I had transformed my life completely. The blog I started had evolved into a consulting business focused on financial literacy for young adults. I spoke at universities, wrote articles for major publications, and developed online courses about protecting yourself from financial abuse. My story resonated with thousands of people who had experienced similar betrayals, and I built a community around shared experiences and mutual support. The trust fund money, what remained of it, and what my parents had repaid, had grown substantially through careful investment. My grandmother had been an excellent teacher, showing me how to evaluate properties, understand market trends, and make strategic decisions. I owned 3 rental properties in Austin and had investments in several commercial developments. At 28 years old, I had built the financial foundation my trust fund was supposed to provide, but I had done it myself. My parents continued their descent into obscurity and financial struggle. My father bounced between sales jobs, never staying anywhere long, his reputation always catching up to him eventually. My mother worked her receptionist job and occasionally tried to sell cosmetics or supplements through multi-level marketing schemes, always chasing the next opportunity that promised easy money. They made their monthly payments to me without fail, terrified of what might happen if they missed even one. I had not spoken to them in 3 years, had not responded to birthday cards or holiday messages, had not acknowledged their existence except as a cautionary tale in my presentations. My grandmother approved, though she occasionally suggested that I might consider accepting an apology if they ever offered a genuine one. But I knew they never would. To truly apologize, they would have to accept full responsibility for what they had done, and they were not capable of that kind of honesty. Then I received a phone call from Patricia, my grandmother's attorney, who had become my attorney as well. My father had filed for bankruptcy. He was trying to discharge the debt to me as part of his bankruptcy proceedings, claiming it was unsecured and should be eliminated along with his credit card bills and medical expenses. "Can he do that?" I asked, feeling the old anger flare back to life. "He can try," Patricia said. "But we have the settlement agreement, which structures the repayment as restitution for fraud. That is much harder to discharge in bankruptcy. We will fight it, and we will probably win. But it is going to be messy." Messy was an understatement. The bankruptcy proceedings dragged on for months, with my father's attorney arguing that the debt was causing undue hardship, that he had already paid back a substantial amount, that he should be given a fresh start. My attorney countered with evidence of his continued poor financial decisions, his refusal to downsize his lifestyle appropriately, his lack of genuine remorse. The bankruptcy judge was a woman in her 60s, who listened to both sides with an expression that gave nothing away. When it came time for testimony, I took the stand and told my story once more, this time under oath and with my father sitting just a few feet away. He would not look at me, kept his eyes fixed on the table in front of him, his hands clenched together. "Mr. Brennan," the judge said when it was his turn to testify, "why should this court discharge a debt that arose from your theft from your own daughter?" "It was not theft," he said, his voice barely audible. "It was mismanagement. I was trying to grow the money, trying to give her more than she started with. I made mistakes, yes, but they were mistakes of judgment, not malice. You spent $400,000 on a company you knew was failing so you could secure a job for yourself," the judge said, looking at the documents in front of her. "You allowed your daughter to take on student loans while you had access to millions of dollars held in trust for her benefit. You never disclosed the trust fund to her even when she explicitly worried about finances in your presence. Does that sound like mere mismanagement to you?" My father had no answer. His attorney tried to redirect, to focus on his current financial situation and his inability to pay, but the judge cut him off. "I am denying your petition to discharge this debt," she said. "You entered into a settlement agreement to avoid criminal prosecution. That agreement included restitution for the funds you misappropriated. You do not get to escape that obligation through bankruptcy. The debt will survive these proceedings, and you will continue making payments according to the agreed schedule." I watched my father's face crumble, watched him age 10 years in an instant. His attorney whispered something to him, probably advising him not to react, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. He had thought bankruptcy would be his escape, his way out from under the weight of what he had done. Instead, it was just another public reminder of his failure. After the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse with Patricia, enjoying the warm spring air and the taste of victory. My father emerged a few minutes later with his attorney, and for the first time in 3 years, we were face to face. He stopped when he saw me, his expression complex and unreadable. His attorney tried to steer him away, but he shook off the guiding hand. "Maggie," he said. "Just my name, nothing else." "Gregory," I replied, refusing to call him Dad. "I hope you are satisfied," he said, and there was bitterness in his voice that surprised me. "You have destroyed our lives. Was it worth it?" "You destroyed your own lives," I said calmly. "I just made sure everyone knew about it. And yes, it was absolutely worth it. We are your parents. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. We loved you. Does that count for nothing?" You did those things with money you stole from me, I said. And if you had actually loved me, you would not have spent my entire future on your own ego and vanity. So no, it counts for nothing. My mother was easier to break than my father. She had always been more concerned with appearances, more fragile beneath her carefully constructed exterior. The combination of financial ruin, social ostracism, and her daughter's very public condemnation wore her down until she was a shadow of the woman she had been. I heard through relatives that she had started drinking, that she called in sick to work frequently, that she spent hours scrolling through my social media, looking at the life I had built without her. Aunt Carol, who had remained in contact with me, reported that my mother talked constantly about trying to make amends, about wanting a chance to explain herself properly. She is falling apart, Carol told me during one of our occasional coffee meetings. I know you have every right to hate her, but watching her destroy herself is hard. She is still my sister. Then maybe you should tell her to get therapy, I said, and to stop drinking, and to take actual responsibility for what she did instead of wallowing in self-pity. I have told her all those things. She does not listen to me, but she might listen to you. I doubt that very much. But the seed was planted. I found myself thinking about my mother more than I wanted to, wondering if there was any satisfaction to be gained from watching her complete breakdown. The anger that had fueled me for 3 years was still there, but it had calcified into something colder and harder. I no longer fantasized about their suffering. I simply accepted it as the natural consequence of their actions. Then my grandmother had a stroke. It was relatively mild, and she recovered quickly, but it reminded me forcefully that she would not be around forever. She was 81 now, still sharp and active, but mortal nonetheless. After she came home from the hospital, I spent more time with her, helping manage her business affairs, and learning everything I could about the empire she had built. I am proud of what you have become, she told me one evening as we reviewed financial statements in her study. You took a terrible situation and turned it into strength. You are going to be very successful, Maggie. I learned from the best, I said, as I always did. But there is something I want you to think about, she continued, setting down her pen and looking at me directly. Revenge is satisfying, and your parents deserved everything they got. But carrying that anger forever will poison you eventually. At some point, you have to decide if maintaining your rage is worth the energy it costs you. Are you saying I should forgive them? Absolutely not. Forgiveness is overrated and mostly benefits the person who did wrong. But you can put it down without forgiving them. You can decide that they are no longer worth your emotional investment. You can move forward without carrying them with you. I thought about her words for days afterward. My parents were already destroyed, their lives ruined, their reputations shattered. They would spend the next 7 years making payments to me, a constant drain on their limited resources. Everyone who mattered knew what they had done. What more did I need? But there was one thing left, one final move that would complete the chess game I had been playing. My grandmother owned a small commercial building in the neighborhood where my parents now lived. It housed a medical practice, a law office, and a couple of retail spaces. The lease on the medical practice was coming up for renewal, and the practice was looking to expand, possibly taking over the retail spaces as well. The receptionist job my mother worked was at that medical practice. I approached my grandmother with a proposal. The medical practice wanted to expand, which meant renovating the space and raising the rent to cover the improvements. The current retail tenants would have to relocate, and the practice would need to hire additional staff for the expanded office. Let me buy the building from you, I said. Fair market value, all business. Then let me manage the renovation and the lease negotiations. My grandmother studied me with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. You want to be your mother's landlord. Indirectly, yes, and I want to make sure that when the practice expands and hires new staff, they understand that they should promote from within when possible. You are going to give her a better job. I am going to create an opportunity for her to have a better job if she can get her act together and earn it. The practice manager already likes her work when she actually shows up. If she can be reliable, if she can prove herself valuable, she might actually have a future there. And if she cannot, then she will continue being miserable in a job she hates, watching other people get promoted while she stagnates. Either way, I win. My grandmother laughed, a sound of genuine delight. You are absolutely ruthless. I love it. Let us draw up the paperwork. I bought the building for $1.3 million, taking out a commercial mortgage and using some of my investment capital for the down payment. It was a good investment regardless of the emotional satisfaction. Located in a neighborhood that was slowly gentrifying, with reliable tenants and room for growth. The renovation took 4 months. I worked with the medical practice to design an expansion that would double their patient capacity and allow them to offer additional services. I negotiated the new lease at rates that were fair but profitable, and I made sure the practice manager understood that I was a hands-on landlord who expected excellence. My mother had no idea I owned the building. The purchase was done through an LLC, the renovations managed by a property management company. As far as she knew, her workplace was simply expanding, creating new opportunities for advancement. 6 months after I bought the building, my mother applied for a promotion to office manager. According to Aunt Carol, she had stopped drinking, started therapy, and was genuinely trying to turn her life around. The practice manager praised her work ethic and reliability, noting that she had not called in sick once in the past 4 months. The practice manager called me as the building owner to discuss the promotion, as was standard for key personnel decisions. She has really impressed me lately, she said. I know she had some personal issues in the past, but she seems committed to doing better. I would like to offer her the position, with a substantial raise. What kind of personal issues? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I am not entirely sure of the details. Something about financial problems and family drama. But she has been very professional about keeping it separate from work. If you think she is the right person for the job, then you should hire her, I said. I trust your judgment. My mother got the promotion, along with a salary increase that nearly doubled what she had been making. It still was not much, but it was enough to live on with some dignity, enough to start rebuilding. She threw herself into the new role with an intensity that surprised everyone, arriving early and staying late, implementing new systems and improving patient satisfaction scores. Aunt Carol reported all of this to me with something like hope in her voice. She is really trying, Maggie. I think maybe hitting bottom was what she needed. Maybe, I said non-committally. What Carol did not know, what my mother did not know, was that every rent check the medical practice paid me included money that indirectly came from my mother's labor. She was working to pay rent to a landlord who was her estranged daughter, enriching me with every hour she worked, every patient she checked in, every insurance claim she processed. The irony was exquisite. A year after my mother's promotion, my father got a job selling medical supplies to small practices and nursing homes. It was several steps down from where he had been, but it was stable work with a decent salary. He was humbled, chastened, and according to relatives who saw him occasionally, seemed genuinely remorseful about what he had done. They were rebuilding their lives slowly, painfully, on a foundation of actual work instead of stolen money. They would never have the life they once had, would never regain their social standing or their reputation, but they would survive, and they would do it knowing that every month they made a payment to me. Every month they were reminded of the cost of their betrayal. I watched all of this unfold with a satisfaction that was deep and quiet. I had not just taken revenge. I had restructured their entire existence around the consequences of their actions. They would spend the rest of their lives in the shadow of what they had done to me, and there was nothing they could do to escape it. My business continued to grow. The blog had evolved into a full-fledged financial education platform, with courses, workshops, and speaking engagements. I wrote a book about financial abuse in families that became a bestseller, donating the profits to organizations that helped young adults escape financially abusive situations. My real estate portfolio expanded, and I started angel investing in startups founded by women and minorities who had been overlooked by traditional venture capital. At 30 years old, I was financially secure, professionally successful, and personally fulfilled. I had built the life my trust fund was supposed to provide, but I had done it on my own terms, through my own effort. The money my parents repaid me continued to come in monthly, and I continued to invest it carefully, watching it grow into something substantial. My grandmother, now 84, spent more time at home and less time actively managing her business affairs. She had started transitioning properties to me, teaching me everything she knew about commercial real estate and wealth building. We worked together on deals, with her providing wisdom and connections, while I provided energy and modern perspective. "You have exceeded every expectation I had for you," she told me one afternoon as we reviewed the portfolio I had built. "You took a terrible situation and transformed it into strength. You are going to be extraordinary, Maggie. You already are." "I had a good teacher," I said, "and good motivation. Anger can be clarifying." "It can," she agreed. "But tell me honestly, are you happy? Are you satisfied with how things turned out?" I thought about the question carefully. My parents were destroyed but surviving, working menial jobs and living small lives. They made their payments every month without fail, too terrified to miss even one. Everyone who knew them understood what they had done, and they would carry that shame for the rest of their lives. I had built a successful career out of my experience, helping others avoid similar betrayals while enriching myself in the process. "Yes," I said finally. "I am satisfied. They took something from me that I can never get back, those years of possibility and freedom that should have been mine. But I made sure they paid for it in every way that matters. They lost everything they cared about while I gained everything I needed. That is justice." 6 months later, I received an email from my mother through a generic account I maintained for business inquiries. She must have worked hard to find it, and harder still to craft the message. It was long, detailed, and surprisingly honest about what she had done and why. She talked about growing up poor, about marrying my father thinking he would provide security, about how easy it was to justify taking money that was just sitting there when they had so many needs and wants. She apologized, not with excuses or justifications, but with genuine acknowledgement of the harm she had caused. She talked about therapy, about working to understand her own psychology and the choices she had made. She said she did not expect forgiveness, did not deserve it, but wanted me to know that she understood now what she had stolen from me. At the end, she mentioned her job, how much it meant to her, how hard she was working to build something honest and good. She had no idea I was her landlord, no idea that I had created the opportunity she was so grateful for. The irony made me smile. I did not respond to the email. I saved it in a folder with all the other documentation of my parents' downfall, a final piece of evidence that my revenge had been complete and total. They had been broken down and rebuilt into something smaller, something humbler, something that understood the cost of betrayal. My grandmother passed away 2 years later, peacefully in her sleep at 86. She left me everything, her properties and investments, and the business she had spent a lifetime building. I inherited not just wealth, but wisdom, not just assets, but a legacy of strength and strategic thinking. At the funeral, my parents stood at the back of the church, older and grayer and diminished. They did not approach me, did not try to offer condolences, simply bore witness to the grandmother who had loved me enough to fight for me when they would not. I had won. Completely, totally, permanently. My parents would spend the rest of their lives paying for what they had done, literally and figuratively. They had stolen my future once, and I had taken their entire lives in return. The debt they owed me would be paid off in 4 more years, but the debt they owed to their own conscience would never be settled. They would die, knowing they had betrayed their only child for money they wasted on dreams and vanity. They would die small and forgotten while I built an empire on the foundation they tried to steal from me. Years later, My father finally finished the last payment, transferring the final $3,000 into my account on a Tuesday morning in October. It had taken them exactly 10 years, 120 payments, $360,000 to repay what they had stolen. It was not the full $3 million, not even close, but it was what the settlement had demanded. I received a notification on my phone confirming the transfer. I was in my office, reviewing plans for a new mixed-use development downtown, building the kind of wealth and influence my grandmother would have been proud of. The notification appeared, I noted it, and I went back to work. My parents were irrelevant now, a closed chapter in a story that had moved far beyond them. They lost their house, their reputation, their social standing, and the respect of everyone they knew. My father never recovered his career and ended his working life in minor sales positions that barely covered their expenses. My mother remained at the medical practice, working for a landlord who was the daughter she had betrayed, never knowing that every dollar she earned enriched me further. Their lives became a testament to the consequences of greed and betrayal, a cautionary tale I told in speeches and wrote about in articles. As for me, I built something real and lasting. I helped thousands of young people protect themselves from financial abuse. I created wealth through honest work and smart investments. I honored my grandmother's legacy by being exactly what she knew I could be: strong, strategic, and absolutely unforgiving to those who betrayed me. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about my mother's email, her apology, the small life she had built from the ruins of her mistakes. I never responded, never acknowledged it, because revenge is not about mercy. It is about making sure that the people who hurt you understand exactly what it cost them. My parents would go to their graves knowing that they destroyed their own lives for nothing, and that their daughter had risen from the ashes of their betrayal to become everything they could never be. That was worth more than $3 million. That was priceless. Looking back on my journey of revenge, I realized it had transformed me in ways both dark and necessary. I had learned that justice and mercy are not the same thing, that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who should have protected you. My parents had given me an expensive education in betrayal, and I had graduated with honors, building an empire from the ruins they left behind.